We'll give it about 5 more minutes before we start digging in. I think Sam is jumping on to give us a market update.
Hey guys.
Hey there.
How goes it?
Everything's going well. How are you doing, Sam?
I'm doing all right. Doing all right. Sun is shining. There are no trees falling around us. That's a pretty good day.
Yeah. Should have been able to be today then, Sam.
All right. I'm just waiting for my computer to catch up.
Good to see everyone has power back. Is anyone still without power that you guys know of, or everyone back online as far as you know? You can be movie star. Come on, movie star. Come on, movie star. TV. Wait, I? Dave's waving. Say hi, Dave. Nothing? No? Just stone facing you, brother.
It happens. Sometimes my own kid does the same thing. It's like you wave, and then somebody else waves, and they're like all happy about the other person in your chopped liver.
Oh, we lost Sam. So while we're waiting for Sam to reconnect, tonight I wanted to do something a little different than we've done in the past. I wanted to bring Bob on. Bob's my father, but he also runs our construction division. So I'll let him introduce himself. But as we get into it, what I hope from the audience today is ask us your construction questions. You know, if you've got projects, if you've got stuff that's out there, we'll walk you through kind of what we're doing and why we're doing it. But ask away, guys. That's really the goal for tonight. So start getting into the nitty gritty on construction. And towards the end of this, we'll announce a couple cool things that we have coming up that hopefully gets everyone engaged and gets some knowledge transferring as necessary.
How do you keep from falling behind schedule?
That is a great question. And I haven't found the magic 8 ball for that. Have you, Dave?
7 days a week, 12 hours a day, but it's the only way to hell. Are you referring to yourself or selves?
Say it again. I'm having trouble hearing you. Is your audio okay? I'm having trouble. I mean, I can hear you. It's just like not clear.
We'll try raising that up. Might have to gather around this mic here.
I hear you fine. What are you saying as far as yourself or on the sub aspect of it? Trying to stay on track.
Hey guys, I'm back.
Either one.
Technology is great when it works, right?
Yeah.
Okay, really quickly, are you ready for me to jump in, give a market update?
You betcha.
Awesome.
Then we'll come back to your question, Humphrey. We'll get you right out of the gate.
Okay.
Awesome. So we have our active number of listings for July 2020 is 5,437. Our average days to sell for July 2020 is less than last month, and we're at 50 days as our average to sell.
Nice.
Let's see. Our total number of sales in July was 1,909, which is actually up pretty decently from last month. In June, we had 1,723. So to see that jump, that's pretty awesome.
Great. We're keeping track,
And then,
which is interesting, and we're expanding territory, which is fairly typical for this time of year in a traditional market.
yeah, I really like seeing, things are still moving rather beautifully, even in the middle of, here we go again, COVID pandemic.
Yep. Yep.
That's all I have for us.
Any thoughts on what you're feeling and seeing in the marketplace? Are investors more active compared to what they were 3 months ago? What about the last month? And then same question on the traditional side.
I've definitely seen an increase on the investor side. Definitely see an increase in level of appointments as well as active number of investor lookers and buyers.
Yep.
Traditional side, it's, I feel like this year has been one of the strongest years that I've seen in real estate. So, I only have about 5 years of experience to go off of, but definitely like what I'm seeing.
For sure.
So one last thing that I forgot to touch on is our average sale price for the month of July is $250,736, which is actually a $10,000 increase from last month.
Wow. That's a good number.
Yeah. That is a very good number.
Love it. So on the seller direct side, we're seeing a massive uptick in motivation, kind of the tail end of some of this forbearance stuff, I think. And we're seeing a lot of appointments getting set, a lot of ambition on getting things sold. And of course, that also translates into a higher traditional ratio. So right now, and this it's hard to quantify, but we're averaging over 10 inbounds a day here in Des Moines, which is a huge number. Compare that to 2 months ago when we were averaging 3 to 4. Well, they're averaging 4, but on the lower side of 4 a day. So that's almost 2.5 times in the last 3 weeks that we've seen upticking. So it's hard to quantify because marketing efforts have also changed a little bit on our end, but in general, we're seeing a ton of activity out there in the market. People, at minimum, very interested in moving properties, whether that's traditionally or distressed. So hopefully that's helpful. I don't see that tapering off. Just gauging motivation, listening to calls, those type of things. I don't see that tapering off. I feel like that need and that desire keeps climbing as we go. So, any questions on market opinions right at this time?
Sam, this is Jose.
Yes.
Wondering,
Hey, Jose.
when you're saying that you saw a lot of investor uptake, do you have any metrics that differ from local or out of town investors at all, or no?
I don't have any data in front of me. I can tell you that the number of investors from out of state that have been reaching out to us, I feel like is increasing. A lot of folks are finding us on Bigger Pockets and definitely, interested in the Midwest market. For local folks, I would say, more people are realizing that you can find some pretty great off-market deals that give them a little bit more opportunity to make a little bit more if they're on the fix and flip model.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam.
In
Absolutely.
the group side, and this is a little unique because it's not buyer or seller, It's just folks in the area. We're seeing about 30% of the members that are added to the group living out of the area. So when I say out of the area, it's not out of the state necessarily, but a lot of Cedar Rapids, a lot of Quad Cities, about 10% of the overall joining are out of staters, which is kind of unique. So if you go through and look at that, it's an interesting blend, but again, that's not sellers, that's not buyers directly, that's across the board, so vendors, etc. Awesome. So at this time, guys, I want to jump into kind of the topic for the night. This is Bob. Bob, again, runs our construction division. I'll let you introduce yourself, Dad.
I'm Bob Paluzzi.
Can you tell them kind of what your experience level is, what got you into this, and all those things?
I've been doing this since 82. Well, I graduated in 82. About 83. I worked for a construction company who's no longer in business. He was a bank, so we did a lot of the repos. Frank Gager was his name. FIDC Bank, it was out of Illinois. Funny story about that is that after, I don't know, I worked a year and a half, 2 years, got my feet wet with them, and I wound up buying my superintendent's son's truck. I didn't know they were related, and that, of course, set things in an awkward motion. So I was let go from there, and was honestly told I'd never make it in this field, to go find something else. So from that point, I did go on my own for a little bit. I went back to work for a guy named Rav Investments, where I ran his crew for about a year and a half. And my passion is just to work for ourselves. So ever since then, I've been out on my own.
So mid 80s, you went out on your own full time,
yeah,
and never really looked back.
Yep.
Makes sense.
With all the positive reassurance from my family, like my dad, to go get a real job.
So from a mindset level, it takes a lot of effort sometimes to overcome those around us telling us what's best. But, that's interesting. Okay. And what makes you do what you do now?
I just like it. I mean, my passion is the rehabs. We did in the, before 08 came in, when you couldn't buy the rehabs, kind of like we get now. We'll chameleon back into the new construction. But, I mean, the rehabs makes you think. You get dirty. It's not clean work. A lot of guys that do new construction do not want to touch any of the rehabs. That's just what we do. I was actually playing in raccoon crap most of the day, cleaning out a house. So, it's not clean and fun some days, but it's still enjoyable. I enjoyed myself. We sweated. The guys had a good time, and at work. So that's all part of it. I love what I do, and I'll do it until I can't anymore.
So there's a true passion here. So it's more than just a job. It's a craft, right? And I think that comes through in a lot of the finished products that you put out there. There's a real passion inside of that.
As me and you were talking, I'm not a good businessman like my son is here. I have no desire to be a good businessman. That's why this partnership works so well. I'm best and happiest when I'm out in the field working.
That's a really interesting thing that I want to dig into here in a little bit. Just kind of on that general makeup of construction versus business, and where passion lies as well as skill set. So Humphrey, you had a question a little while back. What helps us keep on track, right?
Yeah, keep on track, time-wise, and not getting distracted by changing. But when you see I'll tell you what I sometimes do is I start working on something, and I'll start putting a timeline together in advance, and I tend to tell myself that I can get things done pretty quickly. Is one mistake I make. It tends to take, I maybe a little overconfident in how fast I can do things. And the other thing is, when I get into something, I start maybe getting a little distracted thinking, hey, this would be really cool if maybe I do more to it. And I wind up increasing the scope of the project. But sometimes it just takes longer than I expect.
Sure.
So
Now, is that primarily working by yourself that you get distracted, or?
both. It could be either one.
Okay.
But also sometimes I tend to we sometimes misjudge. There's just tends to be more needed, like physically needed to be done. Okay, I don't see you anymore.
Do you see us still? I stepped forward to mute someone.
Okay.
So, you want to handle, like, what can he do from an operations standpoint to try to get more direction, and how do you handle it?
Well, the biggest thing that we do, I have the experience, but, in the field more so than Mitch does. But our biggest compliment is, and we had lunch together yesterday going over this, is what we try to do, and now we're trying to put it on paper so Mitchell's more comfortable with it, is get a good scope of work together. And that'll take me and Mitch, or me and Mitch, and sometimes Jake. We walk through the projects. The nice thing is, I've been doing this long enough. I'm 56 years old. So I've been doing this since I was 18. So the judge of timing is actually there. But I will find the difference since I've been here in Iowa, the reliability of the stubs versus where we came from is a lot different. There's not as much loyalty, I don't care how many times you use them, on some of the stubs as far as keeping to their timelines.
So one thing that we got away from was, instead of trying to plan the days or the hours, we plan the tasks in order. And what that forces us to do is we go from rough framing to MEP to finish, right? And there's more steps inside of there. But instead of trying to say this is going to take 2 days, it's going to take 3 days, it's going to take 4 days, we use triggers instead. So when we get through all of the framing on a project, we tell our subs, hey, we're 5 days out for you. MEP or mechanical and plumbing, hey, we're 5 days out for you. Electrical should be a few days after that. But when those guys are through a part of the way through theirs, then we call electrical in. So what we've tried to do is stack those really and put it not into days or time frames, but block schedule it more and use a trigger-based mechanism. So staying on track, you pretty much have to figure that you're going to fall behind track. There's always things that come up. There's not a great way to estimate what you're going to get into. So this is a little bit of mindset, right? A lot more grace is available for you in your own mind if you just stay in order, rather than try to hit deadline. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Is that helpful, Humphrey?
A little bit. Stay in order, not deadline. Well, let me give you a specific example. Maybe that would. I was doing a bathroom. This was a couple months back. I was doing a bathroom remodel. It was me and another guy. We were working together, and we put a counter in above the. We put a counter in there where the sink would drop in. So a long counter, like a nice counter, like a granite style counter in the bathroom. And we had it measured out a little pretty tight. So it was a 60-inch long counter, and the distance between the two walls was like maybe 61 inches. So we had a 1-inch space in there. And so we're starting to put it in, and this was heavy. So it took me and the other guy we're working with, we borrowed a couple of guys, and 4 of us together tried to lift this thing into place. And as we're putting it in place, we realized it won't fit. And we can't get it in there, even though we had like in almost maybe a half or an inch of clearance. It should have fit. So all 4 of us, we lift it back out, set it back on the floor. And I take like a dozen measurements at that point and realize that one of the walls is on a slight angle. It's not, you've got 2 walls that should be parallel, and that's how the 60 inches would fit. But but they're not perfectly parallel. So at where it would where it would kind of slide in, it was like 59.5 inches.
Sure.
It was an interference. Once it was in place, it would have been perfect. It would have been, but the wall was on a slight angle. I didn't notice that when I measured it initially. So then we had to take the time and cut out a little spot of drywall. We had to like tip it on this crazy angle to try to get it in there, and slowly lower it down into place. And then we had more work to do. We had to then go back and patch up the hole that we put. So we're looking at what should have been like 30 minutes to put it in place. Took like a couple hours.
Well, is what we do in an incident like that, to be honest with you, we deal with a granite company, and I do make them make templates out of it, because you'll find out, especially in these older homes, they're not going to run square or parallel to each other. You did the right thing by slicing the drywall and sliding it in there. But normally on the granite, especially when they're tight like that, these guys will come out with cardboard, measure it out, they'll draw it, they'll shape it, and then it should drop back in that way.
Yep. And that's an experience thing too. And this isn't a dig at your experience, but it's an experience thing. So you've gone through that now, and you'll never make that mistake again. So now you can estimate time a little more directly, right?
And the other key to that is when they're wall to wall like that, make them a 1/4 inch shorter. The caulk seams will, I mean, if you can caulk them in there, you can blend them in normally pretty nice, and no one will know that they were just a little bit short.
For sure.
We call it horseshoeing. Whenever you try to horseshoe it, I mean, I know you're going for perfection, but then, like you said, it winds up costing you a lot more time.
There's a saying in the field, and I grew up with this: do your best and caulk the rest.
Okay, but you think in that case it would still look, we wanted it to look professionally done. You think it would still look okay, leaving like a 1/4 or 1/2 inch gap in there?
Yeah, well, like I said, if you caulk it in and down the sides and you feather it all the way down and under, no one will ever know it. The other trick to that one is sometimes on the granite, when they are like that, if you buy the splash sides for it, or they'll just make, that way you've got, and then they'll overhang it and they'll cup it, but you've got that 3/4 of an inch to take up that gap.
Okay, put another side on it.
Yeah.
For sure. We had another question come in. Do we think bonuses to contractors would help for finishing on time? What do you think?
No. I'll be honest with you. We're doing a project it's a personal project that's under extreme time crunches to get my in-laws out of here. I hired an electrician, and I mean, we use a lot of them. It came out Tuesday after the storm. I said, Bob, I've got you. I'll be there Thursday. I'll have 2 guys there Thursday, Friday. If they have to, they'll show up on Saturday. They showed up on Sunday, but 2 guys, they worked a half of a day, and by Tuesday, late afternoon, I was actually cutting walls open for him so he could do his job and get out of
So incentives are a difficult beast. That's one of those things, if you put them on the front end, they might help, they might not. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to vetting subcontractors better and not incentivizing it, but also not destroying them on pay on the front end, right? Our banker buddy, he likes to say, you got to leave enough meat on the bone for everyone to eat. And if you've taken all that meat away, there's really no incentive to start with. So then you get pushed to the back of the line when necessary.
Or just in general.
Or just in general, yeah. So it comes down to the relationship piece with your subcontractors, using them consistently, paying them what they're worth. And then, of course, if you want to incentivize them, do it sporadically, not as a baseline. Let them get paid what they need to make to do the job. And then if you want to do something incentive-based, do it in addition to, without the expectation of.
And I'm going to interject, and Mitch hasn't heard this one. But Saturday, when they didn't show up, I called one of the other contractors, electrical contractors we know. And I'm like, hey, I need a favor, I need help, I need to get this done. Drywallers are coming on Monday. He's like, I'm too busy working around my house. Well, guess what? Today I get a text from him asking, hey, you know a good roofer? And my response was, yep. But when I asked you to help me out on Saturday, you didn't. so I'm not giving you my roofer. So is it right? Probably not, but
there's a give and take that has to happen in relationships, and sometimes it comes down to that. And that is something specifically in the construction world. There is a scarcity mindset around things, but when favors are called, usually they're honored. So it's a little different than inside of the traditional world where everyone expects everything. The bond with contractors is usually tight enough that you can call those favors in. So it's a bigger slap in the face when they say no, and you've bent over backwards for a long time. And again, little difference in mindset between office and or construction there.
Sure.
But not the wrong way to handle it. It all comes down to how that works. So transitioning a little bit, why and what makes the best project for you, Doug? What do you look for in those projects?
I look for, unlike most of you guys, I look for the shittiest, nastiest, the ones that no one wants to touch. Because quite honestly, with our skill set and with the guys that we have, those are the ones, quite honestly, we make the most money off of. And back in the day, the 07s, the 06s, and probably now, because I don't have to do that end of it anymore, when it's hard to find a rehab, you can get the nastiest ones because no one wants to touch it.
Yeah.
So,
and really digging into that from the dollars and cents side of the business, those big jobs have the most margins a lot of times because they take the most skill to run. They're not great to start in, guys. Don't hear this wrong. Don't go out and buy a nuisance property tomorrow and think you can run through it as your first project. It's not the case. But long term, I mean, those are great opportunities because you go into it knowing everything needs to be done. There's not a whole lot of misses in that. You're pleasantly surprised.
yeah, there's no surprises when you already plan on restudying a new floor joists, new electric, new plumbing, everything. There's not a lot of times a lot of surprise there because you've already figured worst case scenario.
Yeah. So what do you look for when you're walking through a property to try to underwrite? What are the three big components that you're after there?
Price, just like everyone else, what we can buy it for, what we can rehab it for, and then what we can sell it for. As we found out, a lot of our big hits lately have been duplexes.
Sure.
I mean, I was always, even under new construction, you can almost build 1.5 houses and you sell it twice. So normally the profit margins.
What about on the structure itself? So when you're physically walking a property, what are the three things that you're looking for in there?
Foundation, roof system, and walls.
Okay.
I mean, we have a couple right now that don't reach any of those criteria.
Yeah. So foundation, why? Why is that why are you looking there? And what are you looking for?
With the block situation around here that goes on in Des Moines, most of the basements that have block foundations are either cracked, pushed. Once again, trying to find a mason, that's the hardest thing that we've found since we've been here. Out of all the trades, trying to find a decent mason that does what he says he's going to do. So we were for a while staying away from them, but they're so prevalent anymore that we really don't have a choice but to find a mason.
Right. And one of the big things when we're underwriting from the acquisition side is we're looking on those foundations. Is it that old red brick? Because that old red brick, we haven't found a cost-effective way of solving those if they're cracked and busted. And if you're not familiar, they're a hollow red tube made out of clay, essentially. They're very, very common. A lot of times they're skim coated over, but if you start seeing heaving and cracking on those are difficult to patch into.
Yeah, they're very fragile. Also.
Yeah.
I mean, they're almost a 1/4 inch thick versus a cinder block. So those are the hardest ones to get fixed.
For sure. And then the other problem with the foundations and kind of the root cause is just the general expense of soil that we have around this area, right? So understanding that it's not usually as quick and simple as skim coating something, because those come up on home inspections later. People are worried about that. Water penetration scares traditional folks away in a hurry. So understanding what that is, how to deal with it. You also said roofs. Why roof systems?
Well, let's go back. Sure. The problem with after the bricks have heaved or whatever, now you've got a floor joist system problem because normally you've got a big sag in the ground. Yeah. So you have to be comfortable enough to be able to jack it up. The last one, well, we're working on one right now. Half of the new foundation's been in. We had to put a new center wood beam through it, some LVLs, and it now has all new floor joists and rim joists.
Yep.
So we've gotten that far, but we're still not out of the woods because it's got a 2-inch lean to it.
Yeah, so because that foundation gave, it sat like that for what, 30 years?
And there was an old, someone actually put an addition off of a slab off of the back, a 2-story addition, so it had no footings under it. So that caved in when we bought it, so we tore that off, but with all the pulling and sagging, it pulled up the gable wall on the rear of the house and also kind of twisted.
So a lot of structural stuff, and the ramification of that foundation heaving and giving out is the effect on the structure above it. So now we've got to re-level that house, re-square it up, and at the same time, when we're doing all that, that means updating codes for span ratings. That means updating footings if necessary to support those spans and pass the weight through. So that foundation issue turns into a much bigger hurdle. So obviously there's a solution for it, but you have to be prepared and experienced enough to get it.
Right, but I also know back under that, when you do touch any length of wall for a foundation, you now have to put drain tile on the soak head.
Right.
So.
Yeah, so I think it's 6 feet by code. If we take more than 6 foot of that wall out, we have to tile it. So that's a, hey, by the way,
and new footings.
And new footings, right? Right. So then you mentioned the roof system. Why the roof system?
Well, just like the house we're talking about, was an old house, had 2x4s for your roof rafters.
Yep.
Which, I mean, minimal even back in the day. But someone on this particular house, they went up because it was a long span. They did the right thing. They tried to build a knee wall up under it. But the problem is it was sitting on 2x4 floor ceiling joists.
Yep.
So all that did was push down the inside walls. So realistically, like I said, we did that when we've got it sheeted. We put a bearing wall through it right now just to hold it. Yeah. But the roof system's a whole other animal that we're going to have to tackle after we see if we can get it back in.
So when you say roof system, you're really looking at the structure itself, not necessarily the roof, what people traditionally think of as the roof, right? The actual shingles.
Yeah.
We're really looking at what's the structure like? Is it trussed? Is it stick built? Is it kind of just cobbled together? And what's that mean for us long term on putting this thing right?
Right. Because in the old days, they put your rafters together on each other. They didn't have a ridge board, which also gives us the ability to build. Because now everything's working independently. So the biggest thing is just know it's going to be a lot of work and take your time. And like we're doing, we've got a brand new house that looks, or an old house that looks like new construction, because we literally have wall braces on both sides of it. So we actually went to check it out after the storm on Monday to see if it did blow over, to be honest.
That's 100% accurate. So the last thing you mentioned was the walls. Why the walls? Are you talking from the inside, like the plaster? Or are you talking, what are you looking for when we talk about walls?
Trying to see how straight or plumb they are.
Okay.
Just if they've been cut up. A lot of guys over the years did the remodeling and they just cut a window in. There's no header above it. There's no structure above it. So once you get into that system, once again, if you replace that window or touch it, it has to be egress now. Yep. So for the code for a bedroom, it's going to have headers. It's going to have cripples. So anytime you touch something on these old houses, stairs are the same way. They make you bring them up to codes now. So,
Hey Bob, can I
Sure.
interject with
Sure.
something? When you're looking at some of these things, especially like the walls, a lot of those things might be covered with drywall or plaster, and you know how would you know if the structure beneath the drywall has been cut up and
sure, it is what normally happens when you look at them. You'll see a window trim that sags. You'll see a sash that touches in the middle where it's sagged out at, but there'll be a gap on the left or the right side or both sides. A lot of times there'll be a bump that someone's just tried to plaster over. Couple of times you'll actually see a sag, and also follow your baseboard around to see if it's sagged out.
Yeah. And then of course the bowing and the bubbling, right? So if you see a plaster wall and it's bumped out a little bit, you have to ask the question why. Especially in Iowa with as many termites as we have. So we're from Chicagoland originally, and we don't have termites back that way.
Funny story is the first house that we did here, I thought it was I thought someone hung cardboard paneling up because that's all that was left. It was just tent. And then it was a cinder block house.
Cinder block house with melamine glued walls, and all that was left was that little visqueen front of it. So they had eaten everything out from behind there, which of course got into the truss system. But we had no idea, being inexperienced in the area, that termites were a thing out here. So we just figured someone had stuck wallpaper / cardboard on the walls because, hey, we saw that in Chicago. Why not here? So the other thing on the termites and on the water penetration is we see a lot of stucco foundations and a lot of stucco finishes on houses around here. And that traps a ton of moisture. We've never walked into a project that has that on there and been pleasantly surprised. Always the exact opposite. Is that right?
Yes.
And the difficulty on the stucco, again, it goes back to that kind of the mason piece, is it's tough to find folks that do good stucco work that can blend right, that can match colors, and that can even match stippling, really. That's a difficult feat to capture. So what we end up doing in those cases, a lot of times, is pulling it all down to reboot and get it a little modernized. Now, some exceptions to that. The city's forced us to put stucco on a handful of projects from previous commitments, but anyway. So we had a question come in on how to vet subcontractors, and I missed this earlier. Sorry about that, guys. What do you do to vet subcontractors?
I meet with them just like you're doing an interview. I try to get to know them. I try to see who's, whether we're going to click as far as just like they're going to work for you as an hourly employee.
Yep.
Everyone's on their best behaviors, the honeymoon phase. Sometimes I'm wrong, sometimes I'm not. It's really hard. I also, we look for a company that's not too big, that don't have 50 employees, but has more than 2. Yeah. Because just the volume that we do, we need somewhere in between there.
We're really looking for that kind of middle business, right? So someone that's moved past the solopreneur, that's great. Prices are always good with those guys, but to Humphrey's earlier question, how do you keep them on track? It's a lot more difficult if it's one dude that overcommits to a bunch of stuff. Likewise, on the big companies, sometimes you get lost in the shuffle. They like the volume, but they're also volume monsters. So we lose out on some reliability there.
Yeah, and sometimes it comes down to, everyone wants that because it has to fit. We do the same thing. We get caught in that, this guy's $500 cheaper. Sometimes the cheaper bid is what we always did, even when I was doing customer work. I told them, I said, I try to be in the middle. The lowest guy probably can't do it for what he's supposed to do it for. The highest bid that you've got, he's just got to do it because he's got enough work. And that's my opinion, but that's what we always based it on.
And the other thing from the vetting side that we do now is before they start, it's got to be a written bid. We only work off written bids anymore, so there's a very clear scope of work, so that everyone's on the same page. Before they can start, we require that they get us the W-9 form, that we require a proof of insurance, and we require workers' comp exemption if they are workers' comp exempt, or a copy of their workers' comp insurance. What that's done is it's weeded out a lot of the one-off type contractors, which are great from price, but hard to scale with. And that's really kind of the advice that I give on hiring, is try to build for scale. Paying a few bucks extra right now might seem detrimental, but if you're not building relationships with folks that you're going to use for a while, it's going to cost you a lot more money in the long run. And the first time you get a bid for someone, it's usually going to be higher than the second one. Let's be honest.
Yeah, we honestly got caught up in that when we first came here.
Yep.
We hired an electrician that supposedly could do it. Did a big project that had 3-phase electric in it. A lot of the short of it is we hired another company to fix it, 3-phase mess house.
That was a roughly $68,000 mistake. So just we could have saved a lot of money by taking the next bid up in the long run there and been held 3 weeks.
Yeah.
closer to on schedule. We were way behind on that. That was a big offset for us. So price is not king. When you're buying houses, it's king. When you're hiring subcontractors, not so much.
But it has to fit in your budget.
Yeah, you gotta fit budget. And that's a great segue. From a budgeting standpoint, it's kind of hard to know until you've done a handful of projects how to budget them, right?
Sure.
And we do a very loose budget. It's kind of like that block scheduling that we talked about earlier from a task management standpoint. We say roughly it's going to cost this, and we overpad what we believe things will cost, because if we go over somewhere else, we have the fluff hopefully from saving in the right spots. So I can put out, I've got just a general pricing sheet. Someone remind me, please, and I'll get that pushed out for everybody from a subcontractor side. And that's a compilation both locally as well as from some of the bigger sources like the J. Scott's, the Bigger Pockets, and some of the local or some of the masterminds that I'm a part of that have pooled data. So I'm happy to share that with everyone. Might be a good starting place. But don't get caught up, especially on the front end, of trying to get every dollar accounted for. You don't need to know 18 doorknobs at $6.80 a piece. That kind of budgeting doesn't get you there. You need to know that you need doorknobs, and it's going to cost you roughly $250 for the house. So hopefully that's helpful.
And let me interject one more time, because this is what I'm vetting your subcontractor. We just talked about this yesterday. The guy that's got not the latest model truck that's got dings and dents in it, the guy that shows up in a 2020 with all the rims on it and fancy ladder racks and all the fancy lettering, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to tell you 11 times out of 10, he's just the highest price guy out there.
Yeah, doesn't mean most reliable. Doesn't mean doesn't mean most reliable. Doesn't mean highest quality. Doesn't mean he's a bad business person or a bad contractor. Generally speaking, though, it's going to come with a price tag that doesn't fit our budget or a reliability level that doesn't fit our metrics.
And that's just something that we've came up with over the years. I mean, you don't want the guy that's got rust falling off of his things and tires. I mean,
yeah, right. Yeah, for sure.
What did you say was scalable? What did you say is an indication that the guy is scalable?
Not the newest equipment, not brand new. So what we see a lot of people making the same reoccurring mistake, and that's what Bob's articulating, is they go out, they buy a brand new truck, they buy all brand new equipment. They just started out on their own, and they've got all this overhead to take care of. So where does that go? That goes to your job, right? So it might come with a cheaper price tag, but it's probably not going to be able to deliver with all of that social pressure on them for the overspend. It's just a consistent canary that we've seen. So if you show up in a 2020 vehicle fully blinged out and you tell us you started last year, probably not a hire for us at that time.
No, I mean, a little earlier, a few minutes, I'm going back a little bit. I apologize to everyone, but at the beginning of this talk about picking subs, you said try to find someone who he can do this job for you, but he gives some indication that he can do more and more and bigger jobs.
So yeah, what we're looking for when hiring folks is you're not a 1 or 2 person company, and you're not a 50+ employee company, right? We lose some of that. And we had another question that kind of piggybacks off of that of, are we picking subcontractors or are we picking general contractors? So for us,
We're GCs.
We're the GCs, right? We're physically managing every component of that. So when we're picking subs, we're picking subcontractors that fill a specific need, and then we're doing a lot of the rest. If you don't have any experience in the field, guys, you're going to need a GC to get you educated the first few times through. Why?
Well, also because of permitting now.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, a lot of times they won't allow you to do your own work anymore.
Yeah.
A lot of times, at least back in the day, I don't know if it's changed, a lot of the banks want to see a GC, especially on like a new construction, a major project, and just in case the fact they want someone with a little more experience.
Yep.
Sometimes they'll let you co-GC it, which is fine, but they still want that letterhead out there.
For sure. Yeah, they're really looking for some level of experience for the money that they're drawing against, and someone to hold accountable. That's you mentioned permitting there. Why do we permit everything we do?
Because we got nothing to hide, to be honest with you. We're using, we're licensed. We use all licensed subs that have to be. I mean, a signer doesn't have to be licensed, so framers don't, because that falls under the general contractor. But if anything goes wrong in any of the houses we do, inevitably it comes back on us.
Right.
So we need to make sure that we're out there. I normally, if we're not doing something, I normally try to get out there to inspect the jobs. We just had one that had a siding buckles on it.
Yeah.
Had the siding company come back out, not the siders that did it, the actual people that made the manufacturer, and then they said it was a heat transfer problem. So they gave us the siding back, or gave us siding to fix it. But they went around and pulled random pieces of siding to make sure the siders hung it right, because they were, most of the time they look for anything, just like when your shingles blow off. They look for anything that's wrong so they don't have to work.
And the important piece with that is, I mean, a lot of folks don't pull permits and don't look at having any liability post-closing, right? And when you're permitting, there is a standard of care that has to be done. And that should come across from a cultural standpoint on resale as well. That's what you're talking about, is that warranty, really. Sure. And could we have got away without fixing that? Yeah, probably, but it wasn't the right thing to do. Manufacturer defect, called our sub that did the exterior siding, and it was handled. Everyone's happy in the end.
And with the permitting aspect of it, especially because we normally target one area, you get to know the inspectors. They know what they expect. I mean, codes are meant to be interpreted. You can have two different inspectors read a code differently. You have to know which inspector you've got on what he wants. And honestly, there's no sense fighting them. I used to when I was younger, but you don't win. They dig their heels in, and then you get a bad taste. So I've always found out that if you accommodate to the inspector, whichever one it is, whether it's the south side, east side, or whatever, and then you get that reputation with them because you don't flip the inspections and everything else, that they will answer your phone calls quicker. They will come out to do your inspections a little quicker because they know they're not going to be tied up in red tagging a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, and the other, I mean, you're right, they answer the calls, but if you have a question on something, having that relationship with the inspector, hey, I think the span rating's close, but do you think we need to expand this footing to hold it? A lot of times they'll give us an opinion. If they don't know, obviously we go to an engineer, but a lot of times they'll dig into the code, they'll look at it for us to make sure we're interpreting the right things for what they expect to see in those projects.
They're actually there to help you. Everyone gets this ideal that the inspectors are out there to hurt you, that they're going to just dry things out. It's truly not what we've found out. What the inspectors, especially around here in Des Moines, they're out there to help you. They're willing to give you the knowledge. They would prefer that you have some knowledge, but they don't want to run your job for you, but they will give you pointers.
Correct. Yeah. We had a question come in. Does Bob GC for others? I'm going to let you answer that.
Not anymore, no. I would love to, but quite honestly, we have way too much work for ourselves. We've got a backlog right now. I mean, don't get me wrong, if you guys need some pointers or whatever, I am not, and I'm going to put this right out there, I am not great on a computer, but if you want to text me, I will gladly help you guys. And if you ever need a hand, I mean, that's what we're trying to do. If you need someone to come out on the side to look at it or whatever, I'll come out and help you.
Show you how to do it. Not physically, maybe swing a hammer to show you how to do it, but not as a job basis, as an advice basis.
Sure.
Yeah. So I want to be really clear. Like, this is not a sales pitch to endorse our construction company, guys. This is really genuinely to try to get some knowledge transferred to folks and get connected with people that need the help inside of the construction world, so we can take Des Moines as a community to the next level and stop circumventing some of the codes that are out there that inevitably doesn't add value to our area. So another question we had come in: what's the biggest mistake we've made? But even before we were out here, or before we were doing what we were doing in Chicago, what's your biggest mistake, Deb?
I'll be honest with you, I think the biggest mistake we ever made was hiring an electrician on our biggest project that we did out there. That and not realizing, quite honestly, how long mid-am takes to come put a transformer in.
Yeah, that's a reoccurring mistake that we keep making is expecting the American to come out at a time that makes any sense logistically.
I mean, we applied up for this particular job, I think 3-4 months ahead of time, and they were hooking it up the day we were trying to have people move in.
Yep.
And I mean, that's 3-4 months ahead of time that we needed them. It still took them 6 to 7 months to come out.
I've got 2 other mistakes that come to mind. We inherited the issues, but they weren't necessarily our fault. So we sold the property on contract recently. Ended up getting it back after the gentleman decided to let his contractor cut out all of the bearing walls in the house.
He took out the bearing walls above the dormer. He took out, they actually stopped over the house would have fallen on them. They actually stopped when they got the Sawzall blade stuck in the 2x4 they were cutting because there was so much pressure on it. Not only did he take out the bearing walls, though, he took out over a quarter of the flooring. So once again, with the whole
cross support.
Yeah. So there's no decking on it. There's no floor on it. He also, once again, not permitted, tried to, he was putting in footings for the new walls that were 6 inches deep instead of 42.
So that comes down to the level of experience that was missed. We should have underwrote better. That's on me in the office side of things. We refine process so that does not happen again. But understanding what you're doing and having the self-awareness not to jump in over your head, or at least ask for help, because we were a phone call away on this project. Gladly would have popped over. In fact, we ended up popping over the day we got the phone call. And had to put that puppy into a brace standard so it didn't fall on the next wind gust. So that one did make it through this windstorm that we had as well.
It will not make it through winter if we don't get to with the snow on that.
That's 100% accurate. And then the other one that I think of is just letting properties sit vacant and the damage that can happen on vacant properties if we don't get to them.
And most of that stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Urban mining, where they strip out all your copper and move into it like it's theirs.
So we've had issues. We've had tenants move out in the night, leave all the faucets on, turn off the furnace. Not necessarily a construction mistake, but a bad management mistake on our end. Flood the house, freezes over. That was a fun project to put back together. One of the other mistakes that I recall is vacant property, water leak just sporadically happened. That was months before we got back.
Yeah, we were checking on them by week. Actually, we did. That was a winter. It froze. Yeah. And then became an ice skating rink.
Yeah. That was a little unique. So a lot of water issues. So what we do to circumvent that now is if they're sitting vacant, we're throwing security systems in them to help avoid some of that theft. And we're also turning utilities off at least at the meter so that there's no water issues. We might keep, if it's a finished house, we obviously keep heat on it. But
and we try to do a weekly inspection.
Yeah.
What system did you say you put in there to prevent water issues? I didn't quite hear you.
We use Simply Safe. So Simply Safe has it's pay by the month, which is or actually it's pay by the day. So you can turn them on, turn them off as needed. Inside of there, they got that like water monitor, right?
Yeah, they got a water monitor. They've got motion detectors. They've got door detectors. And don't get me wrong, we still had doors kicked in. The nice thing is the door got kicked in, but they didn't get the appliances out. So it still costs us a door, which you're never going to stop. But it wasn't all the appliances.
Right. Mitigated some of the damages, didn't offset all of them, but definitely helped. And those water monitors are fantastic. I mean, they'll if you put them in the basement, put them near wherever your penetrations are, they'll detect it pretty quickly. It also got metered smoke alarms and that kind of stuff. We don't use those as much.
Yeah, it beats the alternative when the water company calls you and goes, hey, you use 1,000 gallons of water today, or
right? Yeah, that's always a good surprise. So one more question came in. It said, how do you decide on the level of finishing? How do you pick?
Most of ours, we go with the color scheme, same tile, just for routine, for paint touch-ups, because we normally do about the same grade of house.
Yep.
There, you know, if we go into the higher end scales, then we do change stuff around a little bit. And you have to determine if it's going to be a rental property, if it's in a mid neighborhood, or if it's in a higher end flip. Most of ours are in the mid neighborhood, so we use the same finishes on every house.
So we've really got two kind of schemas, if you will. So we've got the granite package and the ceramic tile flooring. And then we've got the not granite, so Formica with the LVP, vinyl, and builder grade carpet.
Yeah, but we still do, we normally tile all our bathrooms on most cases.
Our tubs, yeah.
The tubs, yeah.
Yeah. So we always consistently do at least one tile surround in houses. If there's two bathrooms, we might do a tub, a one-piece tub, as well as a tile surround on the other. But generally speaking, it's always
Most of it's always tile, unless we did the one that had a 4-foot shower on it, so I think it's
right. As far as like not utilities, lighting fixtures, plumbing fixtures, we stick with pretty much the same stuff.
and that's where our next step is going.
Yeah. So our next step is we're moving towards warehousing, so making a mini Menards, if you will, warehousing all of our products, all of our finishes, so that we have those SKU numbers in play at all times. We have really two packages that we can pull from, and that's a revelation that came slightly before COVID, but was definitely pulled out and made more aware with the supply shortages of COVID. So that's going to be an interesting transition for us. Going to be a lot of learning and issues, I'm sure. So when you're remodeling that, how do you pick whether we're doing a complete demo or whether we're just lipsticking it?
Well, normally you tell me to go over and try to get it done, and I tell you that it's too far gone to do it. I mean, once again, it just depends on how we buy them. If we buy the absolute crap of the crap, we know we're going to have to go through everything. Yeah. If we get lucky and buy one that maybe had a roof leak on the one side, and it's just one bedroom that needs to be done, and we can freshen up the kitchen and the bathroom, and the layout goes.
Yep.
So it's kind of like on a case-by-case basis, but normally with what you buy, it's always a full.
Yeah, but what we keep ends up usually being the full remodels, if that makes sense.
Because in all honesty, most of the other investors, if you try to pass it on, are afraid of.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Between the timing and the money and just the.
Yep. Absolutely. What about the landscaping? Is that the next owner's problem, or what do you recommend inside of that landscaping?
Well, I recommend it's the next owner's problem, but my son always thinks that, and which I'm agreeing upon. They look much nicer done. We try to now put some sod in, or at least grass seed. Try to do some final grading in that. We've gotten better, but once again, it just kind of determines on
grade of house.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it really comes down to grade of house on the gardening / landscape levels. So it's all over the board there. And then what about maintenance? So how often do we mow? How often are we getting out there to check properties? What's our current standard of practice?
We try to go ahead and do it once a week. We have a mow, with the drought, now we have a little rain. But that's also what we do when we're mowing. We also then can check out the house, make sure nothing's been broken into you. No windows have been broke or anything like that. So it kind of, we used to sub out a lot of the mowing in that.
Sorry, guys. We got a 1-year-old that's screeching at us.
So we found out now that if we do it ourselves or have someone close to us do it, then they can check out our properties. So it's a double. It saves us driving around because, as we talked about before, we're normally extremely too busy to.
Right.
I've just recently, to be honest with you, tried to just go to 5 days a week.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's the goal. So let me ask you this, Ted. What's the biggest weakness that we have on the construction side
According to some people that I've been told lately, me relinquishing responsibility and asking for help. I'm from the area that we do everything ourselves. And quite honestly, when you call me the old guard, that I get a little snappy when I depend on people and they don't do it. I let them know that I'm not the huggy, touchy kind of feel. That's just not how we were doing it back where, you give the guys some pat on the back and the subs have done good. We've, back in Indiana, I had the group of subs and we were always running. We'd go out once, and we're trying to start to institute that now. We'd go out, I got a Friday night, I or the realtor at the time that I was working with, we'd buy beer and pizza for everyone and basically have, bring the wives, whatever, have a bonding experience, because the more that you guys can relate to the subs, at least in our, the amount that we're using them, I need to relate to them, I need to count on them. So the more that I can make this on a personal basis, usually the easier it is to get a favor or at least get them to show up when they're supposed to.
And I wanted to ask that weakness question because I think it's very, very common inside of the construction world to avoid not relinquishing control.
And
to try to maintain.
And I think I can do everything because I used to. Back in the day before me and Mitch paired up when he was at college, and that's how I raised, supported the kids. I did pretty much everything that did except for the MVP. I would do the siding, the windows, the roofing. Quite honestly, I'm getting older. I'm getting a little beat up, and it's hard for me because that's what I want to do because I like to do it. So it's hard for me to do that. It's hard to ask for help, and then sometimes in my mind I'm like, oh, you're being pushed out, so I hold on to things tighter than I should.
And that's really important for you guys to hear as well. Not Bob say that, but just as a contractor in general, to understand the mindset around that, right? It's helped our relationship substantially. But if it's helped our relationship, I guarantee you, if you understand that mindset and try to work with contractors where they are, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to develop those relationships, but also understand ahead of time what the weakness is going to be. If you understand what the weakness is going into the relationship, you can prepare for it, you can mentally script for it, and you can plan a response rather than a reaction. So when working with contractors, the number one thing that I hear you saying is relationship, and let them retain their authority, right? They are the craftsmen inside of that trade. If you disagree with management style, that's totally fine, but keep it respectful and understand the craft inside of it.
Right.
Is that a good summary?
It's correct. I have to rely on instead of going out there and saying, hey, how come you didn't do it this way? I hired them to do the job, like with the siding. They do it a little different than I did, but same thing, it's area.
Yep.
It's just the way that it is. So I guess I have to step away from that a little bit. Don't get me wrong, I'm still gonna make sure that it's upright, but some people cut their J-channel on a 45 and some box head, so those are little things that a lot of people won't even see, but I see that.
Yep, for sure. And the other side of that, right, is understanding, and I mentioned this briefly earlier, understanding that most tradesmen, especially in that 1 to 2 person company, they're good at a craft, but they don't have a business structure yet. So they're really in that scarcity mindset. They're trying to grab jobs. They're trying to get the bids accepted so that they can take some action on that. But they don't have a good understanding of their expectations. They don't have a good understanding of their limitations, and they don't have a handle on cash flow yet. So the more of those problems that you can solve for them, whether they're aware of it or not, will help your relationship grow.
And I'll be honest with you, this is flipping back with you saying that. I moved to a small town years ago where Mitchell was raised at. My first job in that small town was to do a room addition for someone. One of the realtors got me an addition. I was all excited. I underbid that thing so bad. I worked on that thing for 3 months, and to be honest with you, I lost $800 and never paid myself. But unlike a lot of the guys here, I had a contract on it with these folks. I honored that contract even though I lost my butt on it. But that's all part of how you build your reputation, because after that I kept getting more and more. But that falls back under, I'm a shitty businessman. I'm going to be the first one to admit that. I actually told the wife years ago, I'll work 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. I don't want to do any paperwork. So that for planning and everything else that's out there.
I'm holding them to that 14 hours a day right now.
Yeah, you are.
No, but that's an important weakness to understand. And as a society, right, we don't want to admit weaknesses sometimes. And I think it's even more prevalent, especially inside the construction world, to avoid dealing with those and just keep the plate spinning, because that's how we're geared, that's how we're raised, and that's what society demands. So guys, I want to really emphasize this. We have to, if you're going to work on projects, it's very, very important to understand what the demographic that you're working with is and what their avatar needs to sustain. Because if you can plan, again, around those business weaknesses for them, that relationship gets 10 times stronger. And quite honestly, it builds a barrier to exit for them in a lot of ways, because it's so much harder for them to go work with someone else that's not catering to those needs weaknesses.
And the biggest thing with that, and I used to get it all the time, and it's very offensive to a contractor. Hey, take care of me on this one. I've got a ton of work.
The carrot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about I charge you this one? If you give me a ton of work, I'll take care of you on the fourth or fifth one.
Yeah.
You know, as far as price adjustments.
Yeah, and that we had mentioned that earlier, because a lot of guys expect the first time that you work with someone to have the best deal. The contractors hear it all day. I've got a ton of work coming. I'll keep you busy for years and years. Don't have to worry about it. Blah blah blah. And then it never follows through. So it builds up that guard, that shield, which makes it harder for the next guy to get that good first deal, right? So again, paying people what they're worth on the front end and letting that relationship work through over time is imperative.
Yeah, and then just like Monday, all good planning goes out the window when you have a storm, because a lot of these guys, like Mitch said, especially when they're starting out, they're going to grab as many service jobs, you know, when everyone's power was down. That's what they were doing. They're trying to get your new weatherhead up and everything else, because they know that's how you need power. Yeah, they're saying they're doing it for you, but bottom line is they're making a lot of money.
For sure. Michael asked, he has a contractor who says he can do all of the flip. Is that a good idea, Dad?
When he says he can do all the flip, Michael, I'm gonna warn you that yes, he could probably GC it, and there's some guys out there that can actually do that. But all the flip, if you're doing any of the MEP, the heating, the electric, and the plumbing, he probably doesn't have 4 licenses actually, a GC license plus the other ones. So I would question on what he considers all the flip, and if he's pulling all of the proper permits.
Right. The other thing, we have no idea on scope of work for the project, but the question is, does he know what you are expecting of him on that job? Because if he doesn't, he can't meet the expectations that are in your head. So really getting clear on what that is and making
guys too.
Yeah.
Is he gonna, you know, if he can do the whole, I didn't mean that.
No, you're good.
But I mean, if he can do the whole job, that's great. But can he do it in a timely fashion? You know, if it's him and one guy versus a siding crew, it's going to take him a week to do the siding versus a day and a half. You know, same with the drywall. I mean, there's just so many ends to that so many layers to that. And don't get me wrong, that's what I did. I did it all, but normally they were my flips. I was lucky enough, even if the bank wouldn't finance me from the small town we had, I had an investor like we are now that would bankroll my flip project. So if the bank got weird on me, I had a personal guy I could go to, and that's what we did. But it took longer. But it did take longer. But then I didn't have all the money put out for what I considered more expensive subs, because I could do it cheaper myself.
In Michael, from my perspective as someone that hires, right? We're partners, but someone that hires a lot of the construction, what I want to see is, do you understand expectations? Do you understand the order of operations here? And what's your draw schedule look like? If you need money from me throughout this project, what are your deliverables, and when do we get there?
And how fast do we get it done?
Exactly.
Inevitably, we need
Yep.
we need to turn profit.
Yeah, and when it comes to the overall, so day-by-day planning doesn't work. Block scheduling does. But overall job completion should work, right? So if I say 60 days from now, this is where it needs to be, cool, we can backwards plan that in blocks as long as we know sequencing. And the important piece with that is if you're sticking to time frames, especially if you're on a time budget or a tight budget, they'll start looking at that and saying, hey, we're a third of the way through this time frame and we've only done 10% of the work. That's a time to start asking about subcontractors if he's planning on doing it all himself. So you can speed up that process and get back on track.
And then that being said, no names to be given, but we've dealt with people that have taken rehab projects and it takes them a year.
Yep.
A solid year. To us, that's not acceptable. I mean, they're bigger.
We've got a few year-long projects in my house, for example.
Yeah, well, and let's discuss this while your wife is listening.
No, we're not discussing it. What were you saying, sir?
But so, I mean, you have to figure out your holding cost and everything else. And like I said, I'm not the business guy, but I do know normally you want to get it done before the market changes, get it back on the market. So, Michael, the question is, if the guy can do it, minus the other ones, I would just ask him how many guys and get a time frame. These guys should be able, like Mitch said, tell you 3 months, 6 months, put a penalty on them. I've always had penalties on me. You don't get it done, unless we get a month worth of monsoons if it's outside work. Get some time scheduling from him and have some accountability.
That's a really good point. So we used to do a lot of city contracts, both in Chicagoland and out here. And one of the things that was, it's a reverse incentive, right? Was, hey, if you don't get this done on time, we'll give you ample time. So you say it's going to take you 3 months, we'll let you have 6 months. If you're not done in 6 months, it's X dollars per day that you're over.
Right.
Off of your final invoice. And that is a massive incentive for a lot of contractors. Obviously it's a penalty, but it's the language they speak in a lot of ways.
Growing up, I did a $2 million contract over in Illinois for the federal government. It was 100 houses. Finally got the contract. It took us, they gave me 18 months to do the project. And it was 100 houses, roofs, siding, windows, kitchens, the whole 9 yards. And if I did bring it in within I got no incentive like some of them to finish it early, but if I didn't finish it on time, it was $100 a day. Well, it doesn't seem like a lot, but them days add up, and they don't give you time off for weekends. I mean, just note to self, it was done in 16 months. I mean, Mitch will contest to the fact I wasn't around a lot back then, but that was our deal. I finished the project, and then we started vacationing. I had to commit, and I was so nervous because, once again, everything that we owned, that we were doing, I was all in on this project. We had to get it done.
Yeah. And that reverse incentive works on big contracts, but I caution you guys not to put those rigid standards.
No,
but when someone tells me 45 days as a goal, I want to know why it's 45 days, just to make sure their expectations are right. Not because I necessarily care that it's 45 days, but so that I understand how do we get this done in 45 days in your mind, and what are the errors that we need to look out for together as a partnership to make sure that we get it done in that time
frame. And to see if it's coming up on 30 days and they're nowhere near being done, addressing any issues.
And that's one important thing, especially for newer folks. There's a lot that happens behind the wall. Once you get drywall on there, it's amazing how quick that project is done mentally. So there's 2/3 of your project is behind the wall, and that finish, that last third, you can get done in quarter of the time of the rest. It's disproportionate in our experience once you're under wraps. So that's something to keep in mind. Ryan asked about Simply Safe there. We buy, I don't know how many we have. We have
right now. I heard on the radio, if you buy or rent one, they'll either give you one or I had some kind of special going on. Simply Safe.
Okay.
So I was going to tell you
that. Yeah, Simply Safe. Just Google it. We buy the home defense pack pretty consistently. That comes with a handful of motion detectors, a keypad, some door sensors. water detector, and all of those devices are interchangeable. So I can take, if I need 6 motions on this house and only 2 over here, I can steal some from that package to go over there. So we've got just kind of a vault of stuff here.
And on that, though, they also offer main streaming. So if you do have Wi-Fi, you know, on your property or cable or whatever it is, you can actually see your property. You can buy a couple of cameras and
for sure. As far as leasing them, no, that's not something we do because they're usually all in use. They're not hyper expensive though. And I'll tell you, you can find them used as well. Check Facebook, check Craig.
Yeah, I might just do that. I'm just trying to find them for a month basically. And I did Google it that you don't need Wi-Fi, so that's nice.
Yeah, that cell receiver is huge. That's the reason we use those over a lot of the competitors. I know Ring does it as well. I think their setup cost is a little bit more. The monthly's lower with Ring, but you know,
Ring doesn't require Wi-Fi either.
No, they have a cell repeater on as well.
Oh, okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. What other questions, guys?
Hey, Mitch, what have been some surprises you have found after purchasing a property that finding them later would have made you pass on that purchase?
main sewer line.
Yeah, main sewer line's the big surprise that we consistently get. So with
And water line too.
yeah, and water lines. So it's not so much a surprise as we're always surprised at what it costs to fix. I think it's the right way to put that. So main sewer lines being clay tile. But I mean, what do we do to get around that now? Like, what's our solution to know early on?
Well, lately, I mean, we go down there and look and just try to get an idea for the house. I mean, if it's built in the 1900s, you know, there's a clay tile. Unless you see new cast coming up, it means your outside tile. Even with new cast, it could still be.
Yeah.
So we kind of plan for it. I mean, we just once again, when we're doing our overall budget, we'll go, okay, this one's iffy enough. And normally a really good way to see it is what we came up with. If it's got the old galvanized water lines coming in, it's probably got crappy sewer line.
Yeah. So those are definitely canaries, and what we do before we start anything else now, we just have them scoped.
Yeah.
So not during inspection, we just kind of figure, hey, this is going to be crappy. But no matter what we're buying, we're scoping those sewer lines after we close on them, because that tears up yards, that tears up driveways, that tears up sidewalks. If you go out of order, that can be kind of frustrating on the back end of things.
We ran into one recently that it was good tile, but we found out that there was 3 leads into it.
Yeah, yep. That's pretty typical in the Ingersoll Park area, having a shared sewer line, so that's always a little bit of a surprise. But the other, like you said, galvanized lines, so you can, like, if you're in the house, find out where the meter is. Right at the meter, you care about the nipple between that meter and the wall. If that's galvanized, you probably have limited water pressure coming through your house.
Because it's half-inch galvanized, normally
Exactly.
instead of 3/4 copper.
And there's a chemical reaction that happens between copper and galvanized, and it'll corrode that and really.
Yeah, and galvanized just over years, especially pre-war galvanized pipe was just never. We see that with all the old drain lines. If it was made in between the wars where they were using all the material, I mean, you can literally take a hammer and your cast is supposed to be destructible, just shatters.
Yeah, just completely eroded. So I'd say sewer lines are definitely the biggest surprise expense. I don't think we've ever bought anything that we're like, oh shit, I wouldn't have bought that if I knew.
No, because I mean, over the years, I mean,
I got one. That one on the south side that we bought. I didn't bring Bob with me. I bought it on a weekend. He wasn't around. And after we bought it, we found out that a car had hit the building and shifted the foundation, and then they stuccoed over it. And they had done some creative framing to get around the problems on the inside. That's one that we shouldn't have bought.
sure.
It came out fine for everyone, but that's one that we should not have bought.
Yeah, no question.
Oh, we had another question come in. How to streamline the renovation process? Any thoughts on that there?
Not really. I mean, to be honest with you, a lot of it comes down to experience and hopefully you find a decent sub. And that's the biggest problem right now is all the subs are so busy that we call it the screw you price. You know, when everyone's desperate, they sharpen up that pencil. Now that everyone's busy, they're like, here's a price, and if you take it, I'll figure out how to get to it.
Yeah,
And we're having the same problem. So this is not, you know, and when I say we're having the same problems, it's just normally I got a great plumber, great HVAC guy, yeah, double. The electricians, well, they're all busy with the storm, so right now they're all aggravating the crap.
Yep. Yeah, and as far as streamlining, it comes down to self-educating. There's a handful of ways to do that, right? You can grab the books, you can grab the coaching, you can understand the fundamental process, but you still have to get that into action and get the contractors to kind of drink the Kool-Aid, if that makes sense. So streamlining really comes down to business process and then communication, relationship-based communication and process-based communication. That's the only way that we have found to streamline is open communication with clear deliverables.
And we'll find out that just like I'm talking about before, when I talk to other people, I'm GCing this myself, and you know this and that, and it should take 7-8 months. The thing for us is, especially if it's a project that we're on, and not getting sidetracked on your house, you know, we'll have it done in 2 to 3 months. So when I hear 8 months, I'm like, holy crap, that's a whole lot of, you know, closing costs. And it's what we also try to do anymore. Something else I guess to touch on is figure out when your renovations are going to start, because you know you got in the summertime you've got to cut the grass, sure, but in the wintertime when you're heating them things and everything else, especially if there's you've got open walls and no insulation or open attics, it tends to get a little more expensive.
For sure. The holding costs definitely go up when we start heating. And the only way around that, you can't not heat a house that's finished because drywall cracks or water lines freeze, that kind of stuff. So the only way to do that is to winterize it down and then keep the temperature as low as possible to try to minimize costs, or have the project done before wintertime and plan around that.
And hopefully it sells. That's what I said. You can do one over wintertime depending on what project, what phase you're in.
Yeah.
But that holding cost, I'd rather pay the guys to cut the grass than.
Yeah. What's your thought on stage?
I'd go back and forth on it, to be honest with you. You know that. At some houses it works out great, and other houses I think sometimes you do it.
Sure.
Because you've got someone that came up with an idea on what they think it looks like, but then you miss. It just depends on your customer. A lot of people can't see the finished product, just like when we bring someone in, they're like, oh, what the heck is this going to look like? That's why you guys matter for it. You can take the before and after pictures. So, and a lot of times I'm going to say staging probably does help because, like I said, a lot of people just can't envision what something looks like.
And I look at staging as a subcontractor relationship. That's why I brought it up. Statistically, it definitely adds value. We've seen it. It's frustrating, though, when you need to go back, call it a home inspection, right, and something comes up. It can be frustrating when there's stuff to work around, stuff to clean up around if needed. So I like staging personally from a value add perspective. A lot of times I think it helps people anchor.
I don't like it because normally I'm the one moving the furniture.
That's true. Yeah, we warehouse our furniture, so the screws get stuck moving a lot of that stuff out. So.
Would you stage part of the house, like maybe just a bedroom and living room?
So when we started staging originally, we just staged the common areas and didn't do bedrooms. So kitchen, bathroom, living room, kind of that front area. Now we stage everything. So 100% of the house will be staged. What we found was it really sets the house up. And some of those small bedrooms look fantastic with a twin bed in them. And people in a small bedroom, when you walk into it, call it a 10 by 10 bedroom, right? When you walk into that, it doesn't feel like anything fits there.
It looks small.
It's small. It is small, but you can lay it out if it's laid out properly. With staging, you can set it off as a twin bed. People just think it needs to be a queen, so it helps in a lot of cases to hit those.
And it's what we found out that on the ones that you have staged, in all honesty, is half of the time the people wind up with something that's there.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that's a
And I'm always for that, so I don't have to move it again.
consistent question. We sell us the furniture. Buying the house, not the furniture. I got to keep it. He wants to sell it, not our game. But the other thing is, on the other side, you've got rooms that are huge. And when you walk into a huge room, you're like, what do I do with this space? So preparing that space right, showing them how a couch can divide that room up for you and really set off the dining room that you centered a light in, it helps from the contractor side. It helps show people what the finished product is that we were going for. Sometimes they like it, sometimes they don't, and that's the trade-off. But at least it finishes our thought for them. And we found that it helps a lot. So another question that we got are, do we need more tradesmen in the world? Yeah, I'd say that's
It's a dying breed.
yeah.
Years ago when I was in high school, so we won't talk about that, but
A
100
long
years
time
ago,
ago.
I always wanted to go to a trade school, but they were always packed. And the history behind me is my grandfather was a contractor. So nowadays, I talk to the same guys even from Indiana. One of the guys, the electrician that I still talk to, they post stuff up for apprentice electricians to get them into the trade schools. They've got no responses. They got no one. The younger kids, quite honestly, I'm going to sound like an old man, but they don't want to work.
So they work with their hands. That's
yeah, I mean, out in the sweaty field or whatever. So yes, we need more tradespeople out there. Quite honestly, we would, if we could, we'd hire 4 or 5 of them right now and put them on our crews.
And that's where we're going long term is building out those crews more and bringing through that training. That's the goal, I think, long term. But how do we get folks to that? It's interesting because there's this negative stigma almost around with using your hands to work these days. That's kind of sad, but it's true. Most of the contractors I know make more than the attorneys I know. Most of the contractors I know are at least equivalent to what doctors are making. There's a very interesting misalignment almost with that. I mean, there's not a lot of doctors or attorneys that can pull $2 million projects out of there. And don't hear this wrong, it takes time and effort to get there. But 8 years of doctor school kind of offsets that a little bit, especially with the debt involved. So me personally, if my kids want to go to trade school, by all means, kiddos. If you guys want to jump in the construction field, I support the hell out of it because I genuinely believe that's as you said, a dying breed of individual.
I got a 3-year-old right now that can't wait to paint over at the new project. So
Yep.
she asked me again today when she started painting because I told her drywall was going up. So.
Yeah. And the contractors that exist now are absolutely too busy. I mean, there's more demand, especially with COVID, people staying in their houses. There's more demand right now than can be met from a supply standard. So we see it every day. It's just, again, that ignorance of response. No one wants to address the problem, or if you do, there's a lot of guys starting out. They just don't have the experience or know where to get it or have the drive to get it.
Sure.
Why would people?
Loyalty too. I mean, if you're going to take time and effort to help form someone, and they're just looking for a paycheck, it's not going to be the right trade partner. Yeah. We try to run everything as we do, family business, try to incorporate everyone in. I don't want someone that just wants a paycheck. I want someone that, whether we give them bonuses or however this works out, that wants to be here. I enjoy going to work every day. My alarm set at 5:45. I'm up normally every morning by 5 o'clock. Half the time anymore, I'm out by 6:15 in the morning.
Yep.
So I don't know if that's becoming an old man that I don't sleep, or the fact that I actually still enjoy my job. So.
Why would people staying in their house due to COVID create a high demand for contractors?
Great question. So what we're seeing inside of that is hey, that deck project that you wanted for so long because your deck's too small, we're home all the time. Now's a good time to get that deck on. Or that kitchen that you hate. Can you help us with that kitchen, please? My wife's been on it for a while.
And that's echoed through the ones that keep running the 11% sale.
Yeah.
Because right now you can't buy deck boards; they're out.
Yeah.
There's just that's why they're running the 11. I asked, I'm like, why are you guys every week now running the 11%? He goes, because we can't stock anything. He says, so if we put something on sale right now, we don't have enough of it for the sale. So that's why they're running. I mean, just so y'all know, it's supposed to run until the end of the year every week, but I mean, they could change it. But I mean, you can't buy a pool filter right now because of the runs on pools.
Yep.
I had to send someone down to Indianola and buy a pool filter for the little pool we got up for the grandkids.
Yeah, there's a lot of home-based stuff. It's interesting because at the same time, as Sam pointed out earlier on the front end of this, people are still moving, but when they move into that house, they're thinking stay now. They're not thinking this is a 2-year house or a 3-year house. We're seeing that shift back towards people with the mindset of
investing in the community. And
yeah, for sure.
One idea I just had is if a lot of people are working from home, a lot of people probably need an office space in their house, and they'll probably be needing some contractors to kind of do some kind of remodeling to build them an office, like it used to be the bedroom.
We know several people in this office alone that are having those issues because, like you said, they need their quiet space somewhere where the kids can't get to them because mom or dad have got to work between these hours. And
yeah, and it's interesting. We talk with a lot of folks, right? And the transition, the home-based working is happening, obviously. But a lot of folks miss the office, miss the camaraderie. So I don't know that this sticks around forever from like a workplace piece. But I also don't know that it doesn't. So I think we're seeing kind of that split. Half the people are upgrading houses to get more space, and then half the people are investing where they're at. That's why we're seeing this boom that we're in right now.
Sure.
In my opinion, obviously, I don't crystal ball.
like I said, just now there's material shortages. I mean, not only is there the decking, right now you cannot buy a bifold door from, I've called 4 different companies because they come out of China.
Yep.
So we're trying to finish up a project. We can get the French doors, but we've got two bedrooms that absolutely need bifold doors just because there's not enough opening. They can't tell me if and when they'll ever get them.
Yep.
So now I'm gambling on a house that I'm putting all brand new doors in, that hopefully when this stuff settles down, I can get, well, 2 sets of bifold doors, 2 5-foot doors, so 4 doors in general.
Which again is where we're going towards that warehousing, so that we can stop a lot of the stuff that we're seeing shortages on. That's a little more predictable. Might not be more cost effective, and we recognize that, but it's more predictable.
Because bottom line is, if this was a customer or one to put up for sale, we cannot close on it without doors.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of a needed requirement. Is there any other questions from the groups? My wife wrote on the board, happy spouse when the due list can be done fast. That's true. One of the major benefits of having a construction company is if something goes wrong at home, we can get it fixed pretty quickly. Build a chicken coop in a weekend, for example.
Yeah.
Fix our furnace. Yeah, you know, those kind of favors. So. Any questions?
When he says a chicken coop, he means a chicken full more.
Yeah, it's a chicken bowl bar. Yeah. It's okay. Any other questions from the group? Nothing online? Perfect. So what we're going to be doing moving forward is 3rd Friday every month. So tomorrow, not tomorrow this month, but tomorrow next month, we're going to start doing in-person contractor meetups. So this will be at a bar. We'll announce the bar here in the coming weeks.
Or a restaurant.
Or a restaurant, yeah.
Or we can just talk and.
Yeah, so the intent of that is not around the investing like we have right now, but around getting contractors together, both to network with each other, start solving some of those business problems and weaknesses that we're talking about, and hopefully helping them through that, but also to plug in investors with those contractor groups more directly. The hope is that it becomes kind of that nurturing pool for everybody, and then we can keep the investor base and knowledge transfer happening on the investor side within this. One other thing that we'll be doing, Bob is doing weekly updates for us. So, you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, but going back to what you're saying, and also on the contractor, so maybe we can hire some of the guys.
Yeah, it's
Some
always
more
good to hire some
personal
more
groups.
folks.
So yes, I'm gonna do weekly updates on projects that we're doing and kind of show you, you know, where we're going, what they look like at that time, and then trying to put a time frame to them.
Yeah. So the goal is to start showing you guys those projects in real time, giving you kind of status updates, telling you.
Kind of like HGTV.
Yeah, a little bit.
But just Des Moines based and what we're doing
Yeah.
here with the guys that we've got facing the same problems you guys are facing. Where does the subcontractors come in? How do I get more help out in the field? I mean, I'll be honest with you, we're literally down to 2 guys right now.
Yeah, 2 full-time staffers in the field because it's just so easy to find not labor-based work. So we've got a fantastic subcontractor network, but internal employees is
Yeah,
difficult.
we would like a few more skilled people working for us.
Yep. So that's the goal, is to get information pushed out there and also get everyone connected with everyone through these weekly meetup or monthly in-person meetups. So yeah, hope to see you guys there. If you have any questions, we'll post all the details here shortly, and then we'll obviously be posting some videos Bob's put together for us over the last few weeks. So hope you guys found value tonight. Last announcement, next month, Luke, who's active in the Facebook group, will be talking about sub-2 deals. So looking forward to doing that together in real time next month. So just a little plug for what we got coming. Thanks, guys. Have an awesome night.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mitch.
See you guys.
Appreciate it, Bob, and both of you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Bob and Mitch.